Rearranging a formula involves reversing or undoing the formula in order to change the subject. And you follow the same rules as for solving equations with one unknown. Now, for example, in example 1, we want to solve this equation. So the first step will be, remember, when you want to solve this equation, you want x to be on one side and everything else to be on the other side. So we need to get rid of the 7. And the opposite of adding 7 is subtracting 7. So we shall start with subtracting 7 on each side. Now, 7 minus 7 will be 0. So that will be 0. So we'll just end up with x is equal to 21 minus 7, which means that x will be equal to 14. So that's the process of how you will solve that equation. Now, how can we apply the same method in the second column to make x the subject? So basically, remember, we started by getting rid of the positive 7 by subtracting 7 on each side because it's an equation. You have to balance the equation. So we'll do the same thing here, subtract m on the left and subtract m on the right. So what we shall end up with is, of course we know that m minus m will be 0. So what we shall end up with is x is equal to n minus m. And already you can see that we've made x the subject of the formula. X is on one side, everything else is on the other side. Okay, so we are going to apply the same methods to make x the subject of the formula in these two next examples. So the opposite of subtracting 5 is adding 5. So we add 5 on each side. So 5 minus 5 is 0. So we'll just end up with x is equal to 15 plus 5, which means x will be equal to 20. And if you apply the same method here, we can start by getting rid of the minus p by adding p on each side. And p minus p, or negative p plus p, will be 0. So x will be equal to f plus p. Okay. Next example, we have 2x is equal to 21. The first step, we know the opposite of multiplying by 2 is dividing by 2. So we divide by 2 on each side. Now, if you divide by 2 on each side, we know that 2 divided by 2 will be 1. So what we'll end up with is x is equal to 21 over 2. We can apply the same method to make x the subject here. Divide by b, divide by b. And of course, we can see that if you divide by b on each side on the right, you'll end up, of course, b divided by b is 1. So x will be equal to n over b. Okay. Next example, we have 3 over 4x is equals to 11. Now, what you can do here is, we know that x is multiplied by 3/4. So the opposite of multiplying by 3/4 is dividing by 3/4. So you divide by 3/4 on each side. Now, 3/4 divided by 3/4 will be 1. So we'll just end up with x is equal to 11 divided by 3 over 4, which is same as 11 multiplied by 4 over 3. Now you can write this as 11 over 1 multiplied by 4 over 3, and then you just get your answer, which is 44 over 3. So that's the process of solving that equation. How can we apply the same process to this question here on the right, second column? So the first step is we need to get rid of the 3/4. Now 3/4 is multiplied by x, which means you are going to divide by 3/4. So divide by 3/4 on each side. 3/4 divided by 3/4 will be 1, so that cancels. So we end up with x is equals to f divided by 3 over 4, which is same as f multiplied by 4 over 3. And you can write this as f over 1 multiplied by 4 over 3, and that gives you 4f over 3. Okay. Next example, solve these equations. Now, we'll start by solving the equations, and then we'll apply that same process on the second column. So on the left, the first step is we need to get rid of the 5, right, here. Now, 5 is divided by, x is divided by 5. The opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. So we'll multiply 5 on each side. Now, of course, we know that 5 divided by 5 is 1. So we shall end up with x as 7 multiplied by 5, which is 35. So x will be equal to 35. We can apply the same process on the right. X is divided by m, so we shall start by multiplying by m on each side. Now we know that m divided by m is 1, so x will be equal to p multiplied by m, or just pm. So x is equals to pm. Okay, second pair of examples. Now, x is divided by 11. The opposite of dividing by 11 is multiplying by 11, and we'll apply the same process on the left and the right. Because it's an equation, it has to be balanced. So that's why I'm multiplying each side by 11. Now, these two cancel because 11 divided by 11 is 1. So 11 is gone on the left. We end up with x is equals to 6 multiplied by 11. So x will be equal to 66. On the right hand side, x is divided by d. The opposite of dividing by d is multiplying by d. So we multiply d on each side. Obviously, d divided by d is 1. So x will be equal to h multiplied by d. So x will be equal to hd. All right. Example 4. We'll apply the same process. Start by getting rid of the denominator. So multiply by 5 on each side, because the opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So 6x will be equal to 20. 4 multiplied by 5 is 20. The next step is dividing by 6. Okay. We divide by 6 on each side. Now 6 divided by 6 is 1. So that's gone. So x will be equal to 20 over 6. And you can simplify that further to give you 10 over 3. Okay, how can we apply the same steps on the right? So the first step is you start by multiplying by d. So we know that d divided by d is 1, so that's gone. So xz will be equal to hd. And then the next step will be, because you want to remain with x, you divide by z on each side. Now, z divided by z will be 1. So you end up with x is equal to hd over z. Okay? So x is equals to hd over z. Let's move on to the next one. So you have 3x over 7 is equals to 8, and we'll just apply the same process. So the opposite of dividing by 7 is multiplying by 7. So we multiply by 7 on each side. What you'll end up with is, by the way, 7 divided by 7 is 1, so they cancel out. So 3x is equal to 56. And then the opposite of multiplying by 3 is divide by 3. So you divide by 3 on each side, which means, and by the 3 divided by 3 is 1. So x will be equal to 56 over 3. And that will be our final solution. We can apply the same process on the right. The first step will be to multiply it by m. So multiply by m. M divided by m is 1, so that's gone. So we have xb is equal to pm. So xb is equal to pm. Now the opposite of multiplying by b is dividing by b. So we divide by b on each side. B divided by b is 1. So x will be equal to pm over b. And that is our final solution. Okay. Example 5. Solve these equations. So what you may want to start with is getting rid of the denominator. And we shall just use the same process as the previous example. So multiply by x. Okay, we know that we want x to be on one side, but we are starting with getting rid of the denominator. So x divided by x is 1. So 6 will be equal to 5x. And then the opposite of multiplying by 5 is dividing by 5. So we divide by 5 on each side. And 5 divided by 5 is 1. So which means that we shall end up with x being equal to 6 over 5. Okay, we can apply the same process to the right. Okay, you start by multiplying by x on each side to get rid of the denominator. This is an x. Okay, so x divided by x is 1, so that's gone. So we end up with z is equals to hx. The opposite of multiplying by h is dividing by h. So we can divide by h on each side. H divided by h will be 1. So we shall end up with x being equal to z over h. Okay. Next question. Same process. You start by multiplying by x. X and x cancel. So 7 is equal to 8x. The next step is dividing by 8 because you want x by itself. 8 divided by 8 is 1. So x will be equal to 7 over 8. And you can apply the same process to the right. So you start by multiplying by x. And x divided by x is 1. So b is equals to px. Then the next step will be dividing by p because you want x by itself. P divided by p is 1. So x will be equal to b over p.